Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Our guest today is Gregor Gregersen, the founder and owner of Silver Bullion SG and Safe House Depository. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Yep, glad to be here.
Hey, Gregor, you're an expert, an acknowledged expert in the silver and gold markets globally with your business that you do. And I'm glad to have you on for the first time. We wanted to sort of get your take on the latest thing that is going on in the world today. Our own governments are sanctioning the heck out of Russia right now, and they're trying to block Russian central banks from selling gold. And it just struck us as kind of hilarious that our own leaders don't seem to understand that gold has no counterparty risk. They think they can block the Russian gold from China or India or whoever. As an international dealer of gold and silver, are you surprised sometimes at how little our leaders understand what gold and silver actually is?
No, not really. It comes back to, I think, Ron Paul when he was on the Senate Finance Committee, and his fellow senators didn't know that the US dollar was no longer backed by gold. So that says a lot of things. And I think nowadays, in politics, you can explain most things with ignorance. I think when it comes to gold, when it comes to a physical asset, especially gold, it's one of the most liquid assets. If you have money in a bank and that bank is being cut out from the SWIFT transfer system, then, as the Russians in Turkey, for example, which are vacationing, they are finding out, they can no longer access that money. The credit cards no longer work and so on. But that's essentially because they are creditors to a system or completely dependent on that bank. But if you own gold and you own it, you can always find a way of selling it and making it liquid and so on. So I guess if the gold is stored in the New York Fed, then they have a way of doing that. But if it's
my guess is Russia does not have their gold stored in the New York Fed. What do you think?
Well, you might be surprised. Maybe they have some. I don't know.
My guess is that Putin has been preparing for many years, and he had zero. He might lose a few yachts here and there around the planet, but he's not going to lose any gold anywhere. I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure, but just my guess. The other thing I hear a lot of people talking about, and I'm seeing articles in think tanks in Washington, D.C., is some real concern about the U.S. dollar, what we're doing, the way we've weaponized the U.S. dollar with all these sanctions. It's, kicking a major country out of SWIFT. I don't think we've done that. We may have done it to some smaller countries, but Russia, who has so many, 81 trillion in commodity reserves underground. It's we're almost threatening the petrodollar at this point. We're seeing deals from China and Saudi Arabia that they're willing to do in yuan or rubles now. Are we killing the dollar, or are we? We're not killing it, of course, but are we putting at risk the world reserve currency status of the U.S. dollar by what we're doing right now?
Oh, I think the U.S. has been doing so for the last 20 years. Keep in mind that historically, the U.S. has been having a policy of speaking softly and carrying a big stick, and it's been working very well. And the U.S. is dominating the financial system with the SWIFT control. If Europe wants to have its own foreign policy, and the U.S. says, nah, European banks are going to follow U.S. policy, not European policy. So the U.S. power is extremely high because of the control of the SWIFT system. But as long as that is being kept into check and people don't feel that power is being abused, things are okay. But once people start resenting the US and the fact that, the US says you have to do it this way and is kind of being seen as a bully, then the desire for countries to sort of go to something else increases. And so I think the big risk that we are seeing now, as you pointed out, is by kicking out Russia from the SWIFT system, they are setting a seed for a parallel system. And Russia in itself might not be that big of an economy, but I think it plays very well in the hands of China because China has been working for the last 10, 20 years, in my opinion, to set up a parallel system.
CIPS, CIPS.
Most of the world is welcoming that because everybody wants a choice.
Yeah.
And not only that, to give you an example, the Russian tourists, I read an article of them being in Turkey, where you have a lot of Russians. If they have a MasterCard or Visa, they can't pay the hotel bills, they're stranded. But if they have Union Pay, it's not a problem. Yeah, it's a Chinese credit card, and it's everywhere. There's 110,000 ATMs worldwide with the system. So it's actually very easy to get, maybe not in the US, but outside the US, it's getting quite common. So I think with the Russians definitely are going to be getting this Union Pay going forward, not with Visa or MasterCard.
I saw that there's a Chinese bank that has a branch in Moscow. And when all this happened a couple of weeks ago, and all the Russian companies were being kicked out of their European and American banking relationships, all these companies were rushing to this Chinese branch in Moscow to open up accounts so that they can continue. We're basically pushing all of this business. It's never going to come back to Europe. It's never going to come back to America. Why would they, even after all this is over with Ukraine, why would they risk coming back once they're now established with the Chinese system, right?
I think you want to be able to have access to the Western market. So, but I think the lesson over the last 2 decades has become stronger and stronger that ultimately the SWIFT system is an extension of US policy. And US policy might do something you don't agree with, and you want to be able to have a choice. And what most people might not know, but China has passed, or Hong Kong has passed some laws to make it illegal for banks to follow US sanctions if it interferes with Chinese law. And if you're a banker in Hong Kong, you have a problem now because if you don't follow sanctions, your bank goes in big trouble and you're being fined billions of dollars. If you do follow the sanctions, according to Chinese Hong Kong law, you can get arrested.
How's that playing out though? I mean, have they had that conflict?
The law is there, it's just not being implemented. But you see, China is preparing all of these things that if it ever has to come, play hard, then these things are ready. The laws are already there.
Oh, wow.
And I would imagine that, if we see a financial war, one of the starting shots is that we're going to see Western bankers arrested in Hong Kong for, violating these laws.
I mean, a logical choice for them to make would be, all right, if the US is just going to kick us off of SWIFT, or I go to jail, or I can just move to Union Pay and the Chinese system SIPS. All right.
There was a survey done by the US Embassy in Hong Kong. Most people just want to move out. I mean, why would you want to stay in Hong Kong? And 80% of them want to move to Singapore, of all places. So Singapore is a big beneficiary of this, of the Hong Kong downfall, basically.
That's very interesting. I'm glad we had you on to talk about this. And from another standpoint, the way we've weaponized SWIFT and the US dollar in recent months, do you think that's causing a lot of, is that causing central banks around the world to maybe reevaluate their risk related to the US dollar? I mean, they all got to be looking at this going, what could happen to us if we don't pay attention, if there's ever some conflict that we have to go against US interests?
I think for astute political leaders, that has been clear for a long time. Because, the issue I mentioned earlier between the difference of opinion with Europe and the US over Iran, that's one example. The Nord Stream pipeline, there was another one. I mean, you can argue whether it was right or wrong, but, you still have US basically telling Europe you cannot build a pipeline. And the only reason they can enforce it is because the US essentially put a sanction against the company laying the pipeline, which was a Swiss company registered in Switzerland, which basically had to stop the project. So, it comes back to this policy of talking, softly and carrying a big stick. That policy has changed. Increasingly there's shouting going on, and when people feel that power is being abused, there's this long-term shift. But it will take time. It takes decades. But I think this process has been going on already for a couple of decades. Because if you go back 20 years to 2020, I mean, the US dollar was king, right? Nobody would think about the US dollar losing power. I think it started with 2008 with the financial crisis, right? Which really showed how fragile our system really is. And then that increase of printing of money. And then basically we had the last 14 years of printing, incredible amounts of money. I mean, it's this interesting statistic.
Currency. Printing currency.
Yes, not money.
We're not printing money. We're printing currency.
That's right.
Because otherwise you're going to hear it in the comments. You're going to.
It took the United States 195 years to print about $395 billion of debt, which is where we were back in 71. Now it's taking them 50 days to do the same thing. So the speed of deficit of debt creation has gone up by a factor of 1,420 times.
It's
what
crazy.
can go wrong? What can go wrong?
What can go wrong?
You recently talked about your parents living in Italy and how difficult it is having physical cash versus having cash in the bank. Can you explain that for our audience?
Yeah, so you have to understand the background in Italy. So in Italy, taxes are extremely high. It really doesn't pay to work anymore. And they recently did a number of welfare reforms, which includes a citizenship payment. For every Italian citizen, you get money for free. So businesses sort of have been going out of business. And if you do some business, so there's a very obvious tendency to try and use cash to pay and do it under the table. So how does the government prevent that from happening? Well, you don't let people who have cash anymore. Or the government decides, okay, you're allowed to have, say, last time I checked, it was 1,000 euros per week. So if you have 100,000 euros in your bank account, you cannot take that money out in cash. If you do more than 1,000 euros, the bank will help you not to get into trouble by advising you, if you do over 1,000 euros, we have to report it. It's likely you're going to have an investigation what you're doing with all this cash. Now, in my particular situation, is quite complicated because my mom does not like to use online banking, does not know how to use it. And she wants to pay everything with cash, including the helper. My mom is bedridden now. And so she's only able to get, to a small amount of cash to pay for these things because of these rules. And, what I might want to add to this, if one of these listeners ever have intention of moving to Italy, you need to be aware that Italy has a policy of taxing its residents on worldwide income. So if the Italian government decides that you're a resident of Italy because you stayed for more than 6 months, and there are some other criteria, which they mostly decide, they will require you to tell them every bank account you have, and they will charge you 34 euros and 30 cents for each account you have, plus 0.25% of any balances.
That's crazy.
In the account. And for any property you own, you have to give about 66% offset. Now, if the property in Europe, they will use the registered value of the property. If the property is not in Europe, they will decide what the value of it should be.
That's nuts.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
To make it more interesting, if you decide to leave Italy, if they were to determine that you're leaving Italy because you're trying to avoid the tax, they will not recognize the fact that you left Italy. They will still go after you and pay that.
This sounds like California. It's like you can check out, but you can never leave. It's like the Eagles song, right?
That's funny.
I lived in Italy for 12 years. I lived in California for 12 years as well. I tell you, Italy much, much worse. If I can just add one more crazy fact about all of this, we had COVID in Italy. So European central banks, European wise people decided that we have to spend 1.9 trillion euros in help now. Italy is getting a lot of that money. And how do we get the economy started? The Italian government said, well, we are going to provide subsidies if you want to renovate your house. And we are going to provide 110% subsidies. So the more you spend, the more you earn.
Gotcha.
And if you ever wonder why, resource prices, commodity prices are going up, part of it is the government is giving 110% for people to, waste as much as they can. Whereas, companies who want to build something productive, they're going to have a hard time getting the raw materials because they're all being used for, for these purposes. So yes, there's a lot of incompetence. Europe is one of the worst places.
You were also talking about Canada, and people are starting to feel like super uneasy after the truckers having their accounts completely shut down. Can you give us your views on that, Gregor?
To be honest, I mean, I saw Canada as a benevolent sort of country. A lot of people from Hong Kong, Asians, right? They went into Canada, Vancouver, and bought up place. And I think what started to get me really worried was when the daughter of the Huawei boss was arrested. Because if you look at the reasons for her arrest, she was arrested because she was on a board of a company which allegedly lied to a bank. So if you start, arresting everybody who lied to a bank, I mean, that can be everybody. That can be, it sounds like a made up sort of charge. And so it feels like there's no more respect for the law. Anybody can be arrested and just made up Trump sort of charges. And so the fact that Canada did that, made me feel a lot less, kind of uneasy about Canada in the first place. And I think, the fact now that Canada can decide to free somebody's assets because they're protesting or doing something that the government doesn't approve of. That's also very worrying. And I think it's setting a precedent where, I don't think how much they realized how much that is going to backfire, because it is making people aware of the fact that money they think they own in the bank is not theirs. It can be blocked at any moment's notice. And, once the government becomes willing to sort of do so because you're doing something government or the people in power at that time don't like, right, then I think you should be thinking 3 times on how much money you want to keep in your bank, because obviously you need a little bit to pay your bills, but you shouldn't keep your life savings there.
That's wise words. Don't keep it all in one place. Don't have a single point of failure where they can get you. Always have some liquid form of assets outside of the system. And hey, what fits that? Gold and silver, right? No counterparty risk. If you hold it, you own it. That's what our people like to say. So Gregor, I heard that you're building like the biggest vault in the world for silver and gold. Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, so it's not quite the biggest, but it's the highest capacity vault. So if you ever decide to build a vault, what you need to know is that your floor loading is really important, because silver and gold is very heavy. And so oftentimes your limiting factor is how much weight you can put on the floor before it cracks. So a typical, place has maybe 10 kilonewtons. A car park has 2 kilonewtons floor loading. Our place has 90. So it's 45 times stronger than a car park. And that means we can stack silver 12 meters high. And that means we almost have an order of magnitude savings or efficiency gains. And that means essentially that we have a lot of capacity to put silver in. That capacity about over 15,000 tons, about 500 million ounces of silver. All of COMEX silver could fit into it. 3.5 JP Morgans, which is rumored to have about 130 million ounces of silver, can fit into it.
Gotcha.
And we ran out of space in our old vault, so unlikely we ran out of space in this vault, but let's hope.
So this is based in Singapore?
Yes.
Okay. And through your business model, people anywhere in the world can do business and have fully allocated silver and gold in Singapore or other vaults?
It's not fully allocated. We go well beyond that. It's private property. So when you buy a bar, we sell it to you through an invoice. So it's not on balance sheet. It's your bar under Singapore law. And we are just an agent who stores it, insures it, provide collateralization and liquidity if you want it. We also test all of that gold. So we test gold using ultrasound, electrical conductivity, X-ray spectrography, and magnetism, as well as density.
And is Singapore considered a very safe jurisdiction right now for, you know, protection of private assets and things like that?
So if you go to the World Heritage Foundation, which measures like, you know, economic freedom, Singapore is number one. And you have to understand, Singapore is one of the richest countries in the world, but it doesn't have any natural resources. All that wealth was created from attracting business and developing trust with investors. So if Singapore ever were to nationalize gold or do any of these naughty things, they would ruin the economy.
No, I plan to come there. Jim Rogers, you know, the commodity investor, Jim Rogers.
Oh yeah, I've been at his house many times.
Yeah,
Nice.
we interview him about once every 3 months, and he invited me to come hang out, and he's going to take me to buy ice cream. And maybe while I'm in Singapore, I'll come visit you in your vault, and we'll record in it.
That's cool.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You can try some of the strange fruits we have here, like durian and so on.
Well, Gregor, thank you very much for coming on Wall Street Silver, and let's do it again in the near future.
Yep, definitely. It was fun.